Hello. So the first thing I want to say is that I know the sound is not wonderful. This is a problem that goes up and down in my channel. Unfortunately, I'm having to explain this quite a lot because, like I say, it is a problem that occurs on occasion. Um, there's not much I can do at the moment. I got a virus on my computer last year, and I feel that the only choice I have is to wait until I can buy a new laptop. I still want to make videos to have them as a record, so I can only apologize the sound isn't wonderful, but please don't remind me of that because I'm well aware of the problem. Um, okay, so um, I want to discuss the problem of grooming gangs in this country. This is a very taboo subject, but it is a very important subject because it is happening. And this is something that's come very close to home recently, something that's happened within 5 minutes of where I live in Sunderland, very close to where I live. So I feel compelled to say something. Basically, in recent years, we've seen a phenomenon in this country of South Asian grooming gangs, primarily of British Pakistani descent, getting involved in despicable abuse of young women and girls. Now, in this case in Sunderland, a young woman, 26 years old, had been out clubbing, and when she awoke, she had been spiked. When she awoke, she was in a room, and a man was in the corner, and he threatened her. He said, "You're not leaving." And at one point, when another man was going to come in, she managed to escape. Um, this is a testimony that she gave on video. She was clearly very shook up by the whole experience. The police took swabs. There were witnesses. There was a female neighbour who was a witness to this. Now, what angered a lot of people was that no action was taken. The six men were arrested. I shouldn't say no action was taken, but 6 men were arrested. Now, this is what has been very controversial. Despite the evidence, despite the photographs of her physical injuries, bruising on her thighs, despite the swabs, despite semen found, despite the witness whose testimony wasn't taken into account by Northumbria police. Um, these men were basically acquitted without charge. Now, as I understand it, her brother went to the house, presumably to confront these guys. He was arrested. Well, Tommy Robinson and other demonstrators have used this as the latest example of basically a racist mentality that some Asian men have. Now, in this case, the young lady said that the attackers, she thought initially they were Turkish. She tried to describe their appearance, they were Middle Eastern descent. But this is only the latest, or one of the latest, in a long string of problems that we have had in this country. Rotherham in South Yorkshire, which is just a big town outside Sheffield, there was a series of abuse scandals going on there involving Pakistani men, some of them involved in taxi cab business in the town. And again, there was very insufficient action taken. Um, that case was highlighted because it actually got into parliamentary debate on the grounds that there was a widespread belief that the authorities did not want to act lest they be deemed to be racist. And there's been cases all over the UK of this in Bristol, um, in other parts of the UK. This is clearly a widespread problem. Now, one of the main arguments that people who don't want to really talk about this come out with is that, oh, well, why focus on the ethnicity of the attackers? You get white rapists as well, you get white pedophiles. What I would contend with that is yes, you do. But there's a big difference in the sense that white rapists and child predators are rightly shunned by the wider community. Now, there's clearly a problem within the South Asian community, And there have been campaigners from that community who have acknowledged that this is a problem. I have seen imams condemn it. I've seen people acknowledge that there is a problem. So this indicates to me that the authorities are misplaced in being politically correct. Firstly, I think it's a disgrace that political correctness takes precedent, or cultural appropriation takes precedent over this idea that over action, basically. I can understand why people are very angry about that, and there were angry but peaceful demonstrations in Sunderland over this case. I remember walking past one of them, and at the time I was wondering what it was about. I looked into the case, and that's the reason. Now, think what you will of Tommy Robinson, think what you will of some of these neo-national scripts. I'm not particularly a fan of their approach every time, but there is a problem going on here, and it's based on racism. Because if you look at these attackers, now some of the victims are young Asian girls as well, but the majority of the victims are young white girls or young women. So there is clearly a racist mindset going on here, that they see these women as easy, as loose, as fair game. This is despicable, it's disgusting, and it's cowardly. And what these men are doing, these so called men are doing, is destroying these young women's lives. Um, and then to have a situation where they're not getting justice is utterly despicable. Now, let me be clear, I've never been a fan of street justice. I've never been a fan of, um, getting out the pitchforks and getting justice that way. But I can definitely understand anger. I mean, if this was your sister or your girlfriend or someone that, your daughter, and you felt powerless to act because the authorities that be, whether it be the police or some politicians, not all politicians, but certainly some, are not acting. I should also say, not the police in general. I think it would be wrong to think that junior officers have a lot of say over this. They have to follow orders. The problem lies at the top. I am sure there are junior officers that are as disgusted by this as everyone else, and they want to act. They want to apprehend these people, but I do feel that sometimes their hands are tied. And this is something that is going on. This is where I criticized the regressive left in the previous video. This is a good example of where this is just wrong. And there is a racist mindset here because they're specifically targeting white girls because they see white girls as being easy. They see them as worthless, as whores. That's their mindset. It's a totally racist mindset, and it needs to be challenged because the very same so-called men would be absolutely pious and pontificate on the modesty doctrine of hijabs. So there is clearly a problem going on, and it's on a different scale, I would argue, than white rapists and white pedophiles. They exist. So, this is not to say that all rapists are Asian and all white men are innocent. Far from it. But there is a difference because white rapists are despicable, but generally speaking, there isn't a racist mindset behind what they do. They're sexual predators. They're low life, despicable criminals, but they are generally not doing it from a racist perspective. That's what sets us out. And I think that when there is a perception that justice isn't happening, no wonder right wing groups then get traction because people understandably feel that they have no other voice. So when there is allegations, and especially when there is evidence, it needs to be taken seriously. Arrests have to be made, and then bring it through the process, charge them, and throw them behind bars. Now, of course, an important caveat to this is due process, which I'm a staunch believer in. Now, no matter how strongly you feel about something, there has to be due process. So, yeah, there has to be that process of being arrested, going through the system, and going to the courts. But I think what angers people is that when evidence is clearly there, it seems to be downplayed or ignored. That is betraying victims. I can understand if allegations are made and there is no evidence, because you can't incarcerate someone with no evidence, but that is not what is going on here. I think it would be a mistake to dismiss this as lynch mob justice. I think it is it's understandable anger, because these Asian grooming gangs are doing it from a mindset of racism. And if this is just something that people feel is just made up by the right, well, why is it then that there are members of that community that are starting to speak out and say, we need to confront this problem, it's a real problem, and we need to deal with it? It's important that they do speak out because there should be no walls of silence. There should be no kind of attitude that this should be in any way tolerated. And it should never ever be a case that the victim is blamed because she may have been drinking or she may have, you know, been wearing a short skirt or whatever. Rape is a heinous crime and it is never the fault of the victim. So let me know your thoughts. I I'm not a fan of neo-nationalist groups, but I do understand why they get traction on these sort of issues because people really do feel that there is no other voice, that they have no other voice out there. If I was an elected politician, I would be speaking out on this. I would be saying this is a problem, and I call on the Asian community to address this. It doesn't mean that every single British Pakistani is responsible, but they can condemn it, and they can polarize those people who are doing it. I believe that is in their domain. Um, they're not individually responsible, and when the right wing factions sort of say it's all Pakistanis or it's all, yeah, that's not the right approach to take. But the anger is totally understandable. If that was my sister or my girlfriend or someone that mattered to me, I would want, I would be going to the guy's house. It's a totally human reaction. So I'm not saying that people should take the law into their own hands, but that's how people feel when there is a perception that justice is not being done. So the fact that these six men were acquitted, despite there clearly being evidence, despite the house being identified, despite the witness, despite the photographs, despite the swabs that were taken, um, it's disgraceful. These guys were acquitted. So yeah, let me know your thoughts. And yeah, this is a nationwide problem. And to those on the sort of polite liberal left side of things, what I would respectfully say to them is if you don't talk about this, then of course the populist right is going to take it up. You cannot you cannot claim that you're for women's rights, and that's a good point actually. Where are the feminists? If they are so determined to stand up for women's rights, where are they? Where are their demonstrations? Busy complaining about objectification in big clothing companies rather than actually deal with serious problems like rape.